If you think Skid Row or Kensington are bad enough, you probably haven't been to Detroit. Right in the city centre, just a few hundred metres from City Hall, hundreds of dilapidated tents sprang up like a slum in the heart of the city. No electricity, no water, and not even a reason to hope. The streets once marked by Ford's wheels, once a symbol of industrial America, have now become refugee camps in the heart of the city. Once bustling residential areas are now eerily deserted and desolate, resembling a post-apocalyptic setting. Businesses are fleeing, residents are leaving. Detroit, a city once the industrial heart of America, is slowly becoming a true ghost town, where only soulless houses, scrap castles built on sidewalks, and survivors living among the ruins remain. A city without a soul, and even the outer shell, is cracking day by day. In today's video, we'll step into Detroit in 2025, where the line between city and urban graveyard is blurring at an unbelievable speed. If you ever thought Detroit was just a thing of the past, watch until the end of this video, because what's happening here could be a warning for the entire United States. Not just about the lost past, but also about the collapsing future that's closer than we think. For those who lived in this city during the 1950s to 70s, Detroit was the epitome of the American dream. Immigrants, veterans, and workers from all over flocked here to start over, with their own homes, cars, and children who could get an education. This is the birthplace of Motown, the music that brought hope and harmony to a divided nation. But by the 1980s, production lines began shifting to Mexico and Asia. The city shrank step by step, like a body gradually losing its soul. By 2013, Detroit became the first major city in the United States to declare bankruptcy, and also one of the first places where residents felt stripped of their right to call where they lived home. A poignant symbol is Michigan's Central Station, once the gateway to the world, which has been abandoned for over 3 decades. A place that was once a tower of hope is now a silent tomb for a faded American dream. There's also Belle Isle, the once bustling resort island, now a temporary shelter for those with nowhere else to go. As of early 2025, over 2,700 people were without stable housing for just one night in the Detroit metropolitan area. And this number doesn't include the hundreds of cases that weren't officially recorded. Even more alarming, the crisis is deeper for young children, with 1 in 19 public school students experiencing homelessness during the school year, a rate unprecedented in American educational history. Instability doesn't stop with those living on the streets. Even residents with temporary housing feel like they're racing against a deadline, counting down the days before being put directly on the street. Many families are currently living temporarily in hotels, supported by federal funds after the pandemic. But when these grants were cut, over 80 households were left from hotel to street. Although the city requested an additional 30-day extension to find solutions, only 189 out of the 276 supported families have found new housing. The remaining nearly 90 households are still in limbo, constantly living with the fear of becoming homeless at any moment. A single woman living with 2 children shared, "I still have a job that earns money, but no matter how hard I work, I can't afford to rent a place. Everything is too expensive." The ironic paradox is that Detroit currently has over 27,000 abandoned homes. The homes that were once havens are now desolate like forgotten boxes, while families who truly need shelter are forced to live in cars, tents, or on the streets. Why is a city that was once a leading centre of development in the United States today unable to support the very people who built it? Don't take your eyes off and stay tuned for the next part. We will continue our journey through empty streets, abandoned houses, and a society trying to redefine what makes a city. There was a time when Detroit was one of the busiest and most vibrant places in the United States. In the 1940s to 1960s, This place was likened to the Silicon Valley of the 20th century. But instead of technology, what flowed out of Detroit was steel, oil, and cars bearing the proud names Ford, Chrysler, General Motors. In 1950, Detroit reached its peak population of 1.8 million people, largely immigrant workers, veterans returning from World War II, and those carrying hopes for a fresh start. But then everything took a turn. Today, Detroit has only about 630,000 residents, a decrease of nearly 2/3 compared to its heyday. More than 30% of them live below the poverty line, struggling with soaring living costs, declining public services, and deteriorating infrastructure. The once bustling neighborhoods, with their shops, churches, and restaurants, have now become wastelands where abandoned houses quietly decay under the sun and wind. Real estate prices plummeted to the point where a 3-bedroom house in Highland Park was listed for less than a used car in San Francisco. One of the deepest reasons is the expansion of the government apparatus, accompanied by ever-increasing taxes to pay for the cumbersome civil service. When taxes increase but services don't keep up, people, especially the middle class, begin to leave the city. The wealthy left first. Those with means followed. Only the poor are left behind. And staying in a city where crime peaked in the US in the 1970s and 80s is not an easy choice. Over 800 house fires occurred in 1984 alone, most of them arson targeting vacant homes. The neighborhoods that were once symbols of community are now empty. No people, no life, only moss-covered brick walls and grass growing knee-high. The bitter irony is that even though Detroit has over 27,000 vacant homes, thousands of people still have to sleep on the streets. The city once had a policy of selling abandoned homes for dollars, but with a condition. The buyer had to bring the property up to standard within 6 months, something the poor and homeless couldn't meet. There is no housing first policy, where providing housing is prioritized before addressing employment or health. Conversely, if a homeless person illegally occupies an empty house, they could be evicted or even arrested. A paradoxical scene unfolds daily in Detroit as long rows of empty, unlocked houses appear. Yet the homeless still have to pitch tents on the sidewalks, huddling in the city's hidden corners. Why is that? Because no one can connect what is and what is needed. Only legal barriers, administrative paperwork, and a reality where the right to live under a roof has become a bureaucratic competition, no longer a fundamental right. Detroit, in a sense, didn't collapse. It's just gradually becoming invisible to the very values that once made America great. And if a city that once served as a stepping stone for the entire United States is now left behind, will that decline remain confined to Detroit, or will it continue to spread across the entire country? In a corner of a street in East Detroit, there's a 3-story building that was once a symbol of the working class's dream of home ownership. But no one has come in or out for a long time. The entire building complex, comprising 26 apartments, has been vacant for the past 4 years, gradually decaying like a forgotten memory. The irony is that less than a mile away, dozens of families are crammed into temporary rooms, with leases that are renewed weekly or even daily. Entering 2025, Detroit is no longer the place where anyone can find cheap housing, as people used to say a few decades ago. The median home price in the Metro Detroit area has reached $298,500, and that number continues to rise. In the past year alone, house prices in the city have increased by 3 to 4%, far exceeding the rate of increase in many other major US cities. The noteworthy point is, this is not the result of urban renewal, but rather a consequence of a housing supply so scarce that the market is skewed away from true demand. In low-level housing transactions, the type of capital for first-time buyers and young families, The buy fast, sell fast situation is fierce. A small house can receive up to 10 offers in just 48 hours. But the winners weren't the native Detroit families. It was often cash-rich investors from elsewhere, coming in to buy, renovate, and rent out at exorbitant prices. Those who have lived their entire lives here are pushed to the margins of the market, even though they still work, pay taxes, and dream of owning their own home. Affordability becomes the biggest barrier. More than a third of Detroit households currently spend over 30% of their income on housing, a threshold considered unsustainable. The city has announced a $203 million plan to develop and preserve affordable housing, including down payment assistance, new construction, and maintaining stability for existing residents. But under pressure from the market, these efforts are like patching a torn sail in the midst of a strengthening storm. And meanwhile, thousands of vacant apartments remain silent in the heart of the city. It's not because no one needs it, but because there remains an unbridgeable gap between those who need housing and where it exists. The gap of price, of lending conditions, of the speed of competition, and sometimes simply a lack of information, connection, and opportunity. People here often say, half-jokingly, if you have money and a job, you still can't rent a house. Detroit is a place where some houses are empty and some people are homeless. And if a city once built for everyone to find a home now makes those very people unable to call anywhere home, is this still a market decline or a deeper rift between the values that once existed and today's reality? Detroit in 2025 faces not only housing crises and crime, but also a city burdened by systems once built to protect its citizens, now silently crumbling. Nationwide, the Social Security program, the main source of income for millions of retirees, is facing the risk of depletion. According to the latest projections, the trust fund will be depleted around 2033 to 2034, a year earlier than previous calculations. Without legislative reforms, benefit cuts could reach 19 to 23%, directly affecting seniors, people with disabilities, and families who rely on this subsidy, including tens of thousands of Detroit residents living near the poverty line. The rising cost of living, especially housing and medication, has left thousands of seniors in Detroit completely reliant on Social Security as their last resort. But as the balloon began to deflate, despair was no longer a distant feeling. It became an everyday reality. Many households are spending over 30% of their income just on rent, and the remainder is not enough to cover other basic expenses. Social Security used to be a safety net. Now, it's like a taut string, ready to snap at any moment. The Social Security Fairness Act of 2025, despite being hailed as a major reform, is leaving behind unpredictable long-term consequences. Expanding benefits for certain groups, including civil servants, has accelerated the depletion of funds, adding to the already strained financial pressure. Not only money, but also the system's operational capacity faces serious challenges. The SSA office in Detroit, like many others across the country, is severely understaffed, causing delays in processing applications, providing procedural guidance, and even answering phone calls. Some elderly people have to wait for months to receive a response regarding their benefits. During that time, the bills still came, food still had to be bought, and illness didn't wait. In Detroit, the social safety net is no longer a network. It has become a maze. Those who contributed their entire lives now have to knock on a gate that has begun to rust. Are we witnessing the quiet end of a national promise? That if you work hard your whole life, at least in your old age, you won't be left behind. If this system collapses, what will be left to maintain the faith of those who once called America their last home? There's a quiet paradox unfolding in Detroit. The city has people willing to work, but not enough jobs for them to do. Detroit enters 2025 with an official unemployment rate of 9.3%, significantly higher than the national average, and showing signs of increasing again after a slight decline the previous year. In just 1 month, from April to May 2025, the city's unemployment rate soared from 7.5% to 9.3%, reflecting an unstable and vulnerable labour market. Although the Detroit-Warren-Dearborn metropolitan area has a lower rate, the gap between the city centre and the suburbs is widening, leaving a population trapped in a cycle of unemployment, not due to a lack of ability, but due to a lack of meaningful opportunities. The state of Michigan, the birthplace of American industry, is also grappling with a new reality. In early 2025, the statewide unemployment rate was 5.5%, one of the highest in the country. Bang lost tens of thousands of jobs in manufacturing, professional services, and retail. The manufacturing sector alone, once the lifeblood of Detroit, lost 13,000 jobs in just 1 year. And for those who are trying to stay afloat, every penny saved is now even more important. If you're living on a small pension or need to buy essential groceries at a lower cost, try Walmart Plus, a same-day free delivery program for seniors. Some Detroit residents have saved over $30 per week just by buying groceries and medicine online at Walmart Pharmacy. It's fast, convenient, and doesn't require traveling far. There are also people who switch to a part-time work-from-home model, thanks to platforms like Fiverr or Skillshare, where you can teach skills you already have. Electrical repair, writing, technical consulting. No degree required, just experience. At job centres, you see veterans, former service members, drivers, and assembly line workers, all sitting together, waiting for an opportunity like they had in their youth. A stable, decent job, enough to start over. But in 2025, that dream is becoming more and more distant. The constant fluctuations in the labour market, rising unemployment, slow hiring, changing industries, make many people feel like they're losing their footing on a bridge that hasn't been completed yet. If a society no longer has a place for those who once contributed to building it, can the future of the next generation truly be built on a sustainable foundation? Or is it just a cycle of instability labelled as recovery? For decades, Detroit was like a leaky ship, gradually losing its most valuable passengers, the middle class, investors, and even trust. But in 2025, the story becomes more complicated. It's no longer a mass exodus like in the 1980s to 2000s, but rather a selective farewell, where those with means find new paths, while those who stay are trapped between hope and the suffocating reality. For the business community, it's not just about the profit and loss statement. Detroit has seen a string of retailers like Macy's, Walgreens, and Party City pull out, not just due to local conditions, but also because of a nationwide downsizing strategy. However, the absence of stores that were once meeting places, connection points, and safe havens for the community has left many neighborhoods in a state of early lights out, and no one is reopening. Small business owners, especially African Americans, are still struggling to stay afloat. According to a survey conducted at the beginning of 2025, 67% of them expect growth, despite facing a series of challenges: labor shortages, rising costs, and competitive pressure from e-commerce. Some central city areas are experiencing a revival, thanks to companies like Rocket Mortgage, General Motors, Ford, etc., continuing to invest, bringing new housing and jobs in the technology and research sectors. But Detroit still can't hide its enormous gaps. In suburbs like Oakland or Macomb, the population continues to grow, thanks to good schools and stable services. And right in the heart of Detroit, many people are still leaving because of the deteriorating public school system, high taxes, lack of public transportation, and the constant feeling of insecurity. In that context, services like AARP and TurboTax become indispensable tools for retirees, small business owners, and freelancers, helping them optimize their finances, reduce taxes, and access small business support credits. With just a smartphone, Detroit residents can quickly check their benefits and avoid wasting every penny during these tough economic times. Can a city truly revive if the people who live there still feel left behind? What do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments section. Perhaps your memories, comparisons, and experiences will help us understand what's truly happening in the heart of Detroit. No one can deny it. The Detroit of 2025 is no longer the Detroit of its golden years. But another thing cannot be denied. This city has never truly stopped breathing. Amidst abandoned buildings, quiet neighborhoods, and graffiti-covered walls, there are small, but vibrant, signs of recovery. Some districts like Midtown and Corktown are becoming urban laboratories for sustainable redevelopment models. Old industrial buildings have been renovated into co-working spaces, art galleries, and mixed-use housing. Tech startups, supported by local investment funds and academia, are looking to capitalize on low rental costs, ample space, and a diverse workforce. The city government, after decades of being considered inefficient, has now launched a series of new pilot programs, from digital public service systems to microloans to help small homeowners renovate their properties. In the field of public health, mobile health clinics and mental health centers are expanding their operations, particularly in areas heavily affected by the homelessness crisis. Nevertheless, there remains a significant gap between revitalizing areas and those that have been left behind. While some vibrant neighborhoods are returning to life with cafes and craft shops, just a few blocks away, homeless encampments still cling to the sidewalks, and the sound of ambulance sirens still echoes through the night. That's why platforms like Civic Plus or Neighborly, which help cities effectively connect with residents through mobile apps, are becoming increasingly important. Thanks to these platforms, Detroit residents can track neighborhood planning, apply for financial assistance, or provide direct feedback without having to visit an administrative office. If the recovery only happens on a few streets while the rest remains forgotten, is it truly a revival? Or just a new coat of paint on old wounds? What do you think? Please share your thoughts below, because Detroit may be changing, but it's the different perspectives that will determine where this city is headed. Detroit didn't collapse overnight. It melted away little by little through buses that no longer had routes, silent factories, and schools without bells. Behind the numbers on homelessness, unemployment, or abandoned houses are people who once held hope, now only left with the exhaustion of trying to survive each day. But Detroit is not simply an urban failure either. It is a mirror reflecting an America struggling between its glorious industrial past and an uncertain present. It's a story not just of Michigan, but potentially an early warning for any city that ever believed glory was permanent. Detroit is struggling in the shadow of its past, but is there a light strong enough to illuminate the future? In your opinion, what is truly necessary for a city to revive? Please share your thoughts in the comments section. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so we can continue to tell stories that not everyone is willing to listen to, but everyone needs to know. Each share is an opportunity to add one more person who understands, one more person who cares, and one more ray of hope for those whose lives are lived in silence. This video is not intended to condemn any organization, individual, or political group. All information presented is based on publicly available data, official reports, and field observations from multiple perspectives. The stories, images, and perspectives presented are educational in nature, reflecting social realities to stimulate constructive discussion without creating incitement, panic, or stereotyping. We do not condone any illegal behavior whatsoever. We do not normalize suffering, and we do not turn human misery into entertainment. This is not a conclusion. but an invitation to reflect together, to dialogue together, and to hold on to the remaining humanity within each of us.